Hello and welcome back. We are back again today with day 2 of my wonderful vacation to Mackinac Island. And today we actually are going to make it to the island, so that counts for a whole heck of a lot, doesn't it? And we're starting off with the ferry ride, which was a lot of fun. As you can see, it wasn't the best weather. That was the big bummer of this trip. But you know what? It's okay. Because I can tell you some fun facts. Alright, so we took the Mackinac Island Ferry Company ferry out to the island. The ride takes 18 minutes. Not a very long ride at all. From what I understand, back before they had the hydrojet water boats, it took a lot longer, and it can take a lot longer still if you want it to, because the Mackinac Island Ferry Company during the summer also runs a pirate ship. So you can take a pirate ship either to or from the island. One of these days I'd like to do that. The competition for the Mackinac Island Ferry Company is Shepler's. I chose to go with the Mackinac Island Ferry Company because honestly, it was a little bit cheaper, and I'm into cheap. So, fun facts that I did not know until I went out there this weekend. Mackinac Island is named for the great turtle in the Ottawa Anishinaabe language. I probably butchered Anishinaabe. I hope I didn't. The Anishinaabe people, the Ottawa people, they hunted and fished on Mackinac Island in the summer from about, the earliest settlement that they found is from about AD 900. So that's a pretty darn long time. And then in the 1600s, the French and the British came along, and the French started fur trapping, the British made a fort, and then later on in the War of 1812, Mackinac Island was actually the site of 2 battles. And by the late 1800s, everything kind of settled down, and the island became touristy. The entire island is actually a National Historic Landmark, and 80% of Mackinac Island is a state park. There are no motor vehicles on Mackinac Island except for emergency vehicles, city service vehicles, and in the wintertime, snowmobiles. And, just for a fun little fact in case you ever wanted to go there, the year-round population of Mackinac Island is about 583, so you'd better love all of your neighbors.
On July 17, 1812, British forces surprised and captured Fort Mackinac in one of the first engagements of the War of 1812. The fall of Mackinac Island opened the upper Great Lakes to a British invasion. For the next 2 years, U.S. forces fought to regain control of the region. They turned their attention to Mackinac in the summer of 1814. Commanded by Lieutenant Colonel George Croghan of the Army and Commodore Arthur Sinclair of the Navy, 750 American soldiers and sailors left Detroit in early July, bound for Mackinac aboard 7 warships. After a 3-week voyage, the American fleet arrived off Mackinac Island. Sinclair's warships first attempted to bombard the fort, but were unsuccessful due to the fort's height above the water. Croghan then ordered his troops ashore on the north side of the island around noon on August 4th. British commander Lieutenant Colonel Robert McDowell marched his troops and their Native American allies into defensive positions on a low ridge in the center of the island, where they waited for the Americans. Shortly after 3 p.m., American troops encountered the British, and the Battle of Mackinac Island began.
So as you can see, they have a lot of interactive displays all throughout Fort Mackinac, which we spent a good couple of hours in the fort. Not only because it was raining, also because I really love museums and different like historical sites and stuff like that. And this one had a whole lot, including a cannon firing reenactment, which I did get on video and will be coming up after our next little interactive segment that I got on film because I thought it was so cool. But yeah, we walked around a lot. We looked at the guardhouses. We looked at the old well that they found. One thing that I thought was kind of cool but kind of creepy is in one of the old guardhouses, they actually found an oubliette. I doubt it was called an oubliette. I guess the soldiers back then just called it the black hole. And it was where they kept their miscreants, their drunken, disorderly soldiers, all of that. If you got captured back in the 1700s, they weren't messing around. If you did something bad enough, they just threw you in a big old black hole, and that's enough to keep me on the straight and narrow forever, you know? But yeah, Fort Mackinac, it was a lot of fun, and even better, after all the walking around and watching everything and going into all the buildings and getting thoroughly soaked and kind of sort of cold, they have a little tea room, and it's down in one of the historical basements of, I think it was one of the soldiers' barracks. And they have a whole little kitchen that is actually run by the cooks and wait staff from the Grand Hotel. So even though I didn't make it to the Grand Hotel, I still kind of got to eat there. We sat in front of an open fireplace, and I had a delightful cup of soup, and my son had tea. So it was really worth a visit. And I hope that you enjoy the next two little segments.
Private Casey, how are you feeling?
None too well, sir.
I understand the sergeant thought you were drunk at drill. He said you couldn't perform the exercises and refused to follow his orders.
Sir, I suppose I just had too much to drink. I get confused when I'm drinking, and the sergeant's orders didn't make any sense.
Casey, this isn't your first offense, so you know this is a serious charge. You were drunk and refused to follow orders. Your trial will begin soon. Do you know how you'd like to plead?
I admit I was drunk, sir. So I imagine I'll plead guilty.
Very well, Private. I'll see that you have a fair hearing at your court, Marshal.
The court found Private Casey guilty of the charges and fined him $10. Over the next 2 years, he was arrested another 6 times for being drunk or absent without leave.
Alright, howdy folks, how we doing today? Good. That's a better response I thought we'd get for a day like this. Well, my name is Isaac. I'm joined up here by Maverick, and this will be the cannon firing demonstration. Before we start talking about the cannon, I think it would be a good idea to talk a little bit about what we're wearing, who are the soldiers here, and why they'd be firing a cannon off, such as this one. So currently we are wearing the Army's undress uniform of the 1880s under the Army's overcoat from the 1880s. But to really try to talk about who would be wearing these, it would be the men of the 23rd Infantry Regiment, specifically Company E and K. We will represent soldiers that have been in Company E. You can tell by the letter E that's on our hats. And Company E and K would have been stationed here at Fort Mackinac from 1884 all the way to 1890. This was a time where actually Fort Mackinac was actually a very peaceful post and actually serving as the headquarters for America's second national park. So these soldiers aren't having to worry about having to go out and fighting any enemies here. This is actually a very calm, very nice post to be stationed at. But they still have to do their military duties, things like guard duty, drill, fatigue duty, marksmanship training, but also firing off cannons such as these ones. But the more astute among you would have realized I said the 23rd Infantry Regiment, not the 23rd Artillery Regiment. So why on earth are two companies of men stationed here for their infantry firing off cannons such as these? Well, as much fun as it would be for us today to try to sink the Starline ferry that's trying to invade our shores, it would be historically inaccurate. Because in the 1880s, these soldiers also wouldn't have been firing off live cannonballs out into the harbor over the heads of people down below. They'd be firing off what's called salute shots. And a salute shot is a blank charge of black powder, and that's it. It's just there for ceremony, more or less. They do this at least twice a day, once the raising of the flag in the morning at revelry, and then once at the end of the day when they're playing retreat and lowering the flag. This marks the beginning and end of the soldiers' workday. So a very common occurrence. Every single day they'd be firing these cannons off. This is at every single post as well. Along with that, they fire these cannons off for other special occasions, things that only come around maybe probably once a year. Things like federal holidays. Take things like George Washington's birthday, Decoration Day, we now call Memorial Day, or things like the 4th of July. And things like for 4th of July, they fire off what's called a national salute, meaning they shoot one shot for each state in the Union. At that time, there was about 38 states, and then the 23rd were stationed here. And 38 states, best time to fire cannons off 38 times is at the crack of dawn, waking up everyone, every single post that the Army is stationed at. Because they want to make sure that everyone knows it is the 4th of July. I absolutely agree with that. But cannons go off quite regularly for those things. But for more mournful occasions, like the death of a higher political official or officer in the military, you were allowed a certain number of salute shots depending on who you were. Take President and General Ulysses S. Grant when he died in 1885, since he was the savior of the Union during the American Civil War, and then later the President of the United States. He was allowed a 13-gun salute in the morning, and then one shot every half hour throughout the day, and then a national salute in the evening. So on that day, at every single post, a lot of black powder was burned. But we've been talking about things that have been general for every fort. Fort Mackinac would be included in that, but specifically just for this fort, they'd actually fire off one salute shot for the first boat of tourists to come to the island. Because even in the 1880s, tourism was the main industry here, and quite often, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays for about 2 hours, the soldiers here would actually invite tourists inside the fort to watch their evening dress parade. So it was very regular for them to come here, and the soldiers enjoyed the interaction. And to celebrate the first boat of tourists and marking the end of the winter and the beginning of the tourist season, they'd fire off a cannon such as this one. And the cannon we have here today is a model 1841 6-pound smoothbore field gun. It's a big long name, so the soldiers call it the 6-pounder. And by this point in time, this design that would have been up here at Fort Mackinac was about 40 years old. By the 1880s, these type of cannons were completely outdated and basically antiques. But they still had them here because, again, they're not firing live ordnance. These aren't artillery soldiers practicing to go out in actual combat. They're just these are infantry soldiers more or less just doing a job. So they just need something to make a loud noise. So that's what we will be doing today. And the first step to loading this for our salute shot purposes is to do what's called thumb stalling. I'm going to take my thumb, this leather glove, I'm going to put it over the vent back here. It's just trapping any oxygen that's currently in the piece. There's nothing more, no more new oxygen getting in here. So Maverick will take the auger or gunner's worm. He's going to send that down the barrel, searching the piece for any large debris or anything that's obstructing the barrel, just so there's nothing in the way of us loading our charge. Even though there's nothing, we caught something. even though after he's done with this, there won't be anything in the way anymore, we don't want to load our charge just quite yet, because we don't want to prematurely go off as he's ramming it down, one possibly losing his hand, and me definitely losing my thumb. Neither of those events we want to happen. So he's going to take a tool called the sponge rammer. It's two tools, the sponge and the rammer. We just get the sponge part, a little bit of water. He's going to send that down the barrel, creating a vacuum, hopefully extinguishing any embers that may still be in this gun. Also introducing a little bit of liquid. Once he pulls that out, you'll hear the vacuum collapse right there. So not any embers should be smothered out here. This should be safe to load. Next, we'll take our 5-ounce charge of black powder, wrapped in historically inaccurate aluminum foil. Back in the day, they would use what was called muslin cloth, but it has a tendency to burn and smolder, and we don't want to send fire rags to Marquette Park. And even though it's quite nice and wet and damp down there, we still don't want to run the risk of setting that on fire and any of our guests down there either. So we use aluminum foil, and it's cheaper. So next we'll take the other end of the sponge rammer, the rammer end. He's going to use that to seat the charge all the way to the bottom of the weapon. So now the can is loaded. There's only a few more steps left here. Even though the gun is loaded, we wouldn't be able to actually fire it yet. So we have to start what's called the priming process. We are going to take a tool called the gimlet. It's basically just a brass spike. He's going to send that down the vent, poking a hole into that black powder charge, exposing it, just so that back in the day, if we were using that muslin cloth, it won't be covering the black powder charge. And now today, us using aluminum foil, making sure it's nice and out of the way, and everything's nice and exposed. So once he's done that and concludes that he's thoroughly picked it, he will take the next and final tool that is what's called the friction primer. It's basically going to be a brass tube with a chemical at the top called fulminate of mercury. Fulminate of mercury is incredibly susceptible to friction, so hence the name friction primer. And there'll be a pin at the top. When he pulls that pin, it'll create a spark, letting off the black powder that's found within that brass tube. Same amount you'd find at 22 long enough a day, and that brass will send that brass tube will aim that down the vent, down the vent into the charge, setting off the gun. So you'll go ahead and attach the lanyard. Then he'll step aside. This time I have to remind you that yes, this is a cannon. It will make a noise. You either put your fingers in your ears or take out your phone to start recording, depending on your priority. And now that everyone is thoroughly warned, there's only 2 orders left to give. Those are: ready, fire!
So after we left the fort, we decided to take a very roundabout way to get to lunch because we were both starving by then. That little cup of soup didn't quite cut it, but it was nice, especially relaxing right next to a nice roaring fire. Absolutely nice, but we had dried out a little bit. And more importantly, it was no longer actively raining, so we were walking along and I saw the sign that said Cemetery Road, and I just had to walk. And honestly, I was so happy I did, because I think I'm in love with the trees on Mackinac Island. I think at least the sections that we walked through, most of the trees seem to be cedars, and I love cedars and hemlocks. They make for a very interesting dark understory. And the cemetery was very nice. It was very historic. The dates on the gravestones, some of them surprised me. I didn't film a whole lot in there because, I do try to be respectful, even though I do love cemeteries. They really are very peaceful places. So I hope you enjoy our footage, and hopefully either later on today or maybe tomorrow I will have what should be our final segment of this trip with Arch Rock, the Butterfly House, and our epic walk around Mackinac Island. And then the ferry ride home. So stay tuned for that and enjoy the rest of the footage.